The night was cold, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and rusting metal. Ethan and his three friends, Jordan, Lisa, and Matt, stood before the towering iron gates of Hollow Springs Amusement Park, a once thriving attraction that had been abandoned for nearly 2 decades. The legend surrounding it was infamous. Mysterious disappearances, bizarre accidents, and eerie whispers heard by those who dared to trespass. "Are we really doing this?" Lisa asked, her voice a mix of excitement and nervousness. "Of course," Jordan smirked, lifting his phone. "Gotta get some footage. People love these abandoned horror places." Ethan hesitated for a moment before pushing the gates. They creaked open with a groan, the sound echoing through the empty void beyond. The park, swallowed by overgrown weeds and decaying attractions, loomed before them like a graveyard of forgotten joy. They stepped inside. The first thing they noticed was the carousel at the center of the park. Once a place of laughter and joy, it now stood eerily still, its painted horses faded and cracked, their eyes hollow and lifeless. The ticket booths were shattered, their windows smeared with dirt. The roller coasters, once the heart of the park, now stretched into the darkness like skeletal remains. "I swear, this place feels off," Matt muttered, rubbing his arms, as if the chill had suddenly deepened. They decided to start at the funhouse, a massive, maze-like structure designed to disorient guests with mirrors, trapdoors, and eerie clown figures. The entrance sign dangled from a single rusted chain, swaying slightly despite the still air. "We should check it out," Jordan suggested, stepping forward. Ethan wasn't so sure. There was something unsettling about the funhouse. Maybe it was the way the entrance seemed to yawn open like a hungry mouth. Or maybe it was the faint scent of mildew mixed with something metallic. Lisa laughed nervously. "Let's just take a quick look. If it's too creepy, we leave." Inside, the air was thick and musty. The mirrors were cracked, distorting their reflections into grotesque, twisted versions of themselves. As they walked further in, the air grew heavier, the silence deafening. Then they heard it. A soft creaking sound, like footsteps on an old wooden floor. Ethan turned sharply. "Guys, did you hear that?" Jordan raised his phone, scanning the area. Probably just the building settling. A beat of silence, then a whisper. Not a distant, ghostly murmur. No, this was close, right behind them. Lisa screamed. They turned just in time to see something move in the reflection of a cracked mirror. A shape, too tall, too thin. Its fingers elongated and reaching. But when they turned around, there was nothing there. Ethan's heart pounded. "We're getting out of here. Now." But as they turned to leave, they realized something chilling. The entrance was gone. The entrance they had walked through just moments ago was gone, replaced by an unbroken wall of cracked mirrors. Ethan's breath came in sharp gasps as he turned, his fingers pressing against the cold glass, hoping, praying that this was just some kind of trick. "This doesn't make sense." Lisa's voice was shrill, her hands trembling as she reached out, pressing against the mirrored surface. Jordan swallowed hard, raising his phone again. Okay. This has to be some kind of illusion. Funhouses have weird layouts, right?" His voice wavered, the confidence he had before now reduced to forced logic. Ethan turned to Matt, who had been unusually quiet. His friend stood rigid, his eyes locked onto one of the mirrors. "What is it?" Ethan whispered. Matt didn't respond. Instead, he lifted a shaky finger, and pointed at the reflection. Ethan followed his gaze, and his blood ran cold. In the reflection, they weren't alone. A fifth figure stood among them. It was tall, too tall. Its limbs were unnaturally long, its face obscured in shadow, except for a wide, grinning mouth stretched into something unnatural. The thing didn't move, but in the mirror, it was standing right behind Lisa. "Lisa!" Ethan barely choked out. She turned, but there was nothing there. Only their group. Or at least that's what they thought. But in the reflection, the figure was still there. And this time, its head tilted, as if acknowledging them. Lisa let out a strangled cry and stumbled back, crashing into one of the mirrors. The glass shuddered but didn't break. Then the lights flickered. One by one, the dim bulbs lining the funhouse ceiling buzzed and blinked out, plunging them into near darkness. "Everyone hold hands. Don't separate," Ethan ordered, grabbing Lisa's arm. They fumbled in the dark, their breathing the only sound until it wasn't. A scraping noise, like nails dragging across glass, echoed through the maze. It came from every direction. Jordan was shaking. "We need to move." Now, they stumbled forward, groping their way along the mirrored walls. The distorted reflections twisted and bent, their own faces warped into grotesque versions of themselves. Then, a whisper, right in Ethan's ear. "You shouldn't have come here." He froze. The voice was wrong. Too deep, too hollow, too close. Lisa screamed again. Something cold brushed against Ethan's arm. He flinched, jerking away, but the sensation lingered, as if something had gripped him for just a second too long. And then, footsteps, not theirs. Fast, heavy running footsteps, circling them in the dark. Matt broke first. "Screw this!" He yanked free and bolted ahead. "Matt, wait!" Ethan shouted, but it was too late. The second Matt disappeared into the darkness, the footsteps stopped. Silence. A horrible, deafening silence. Then, a sound that made Ethan's stomach drop. A wet, gurgling choke. Lisa gasped, clapping her hands over her mouth. Jordan took a step back. "Matt?" Ethan called out, his voice shaking. No response. Just the faint drip. Drip. Drip of something wet hitting the floor. Ethan pulled his phone from his pocket, fumbling to turn on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, landing on the mirrors ahead. The reflections were distorted, stretching unnaturally, except for one. One showed Matt. But he wasn't standing. He was hanging. His body dangled in the mirror's reflection, suspended by something unseen, his feet inches from the ground. His head was tilted at an unnatural angle, his mouth open in a silent scream. The others saw it too. Lisa sobbed. "No, no, no, no." Jordan turned and slammed his fists against the mirror. "Let us out!" Ethan's breathing was ragged. His mind raced. This wasn't just some abandoned amusement park. There was something here, something watching them. Then, Matt's reflection turned its head. Not the real Matt, the Matt in the mirror. His eyes, empty and lifeless, locked onto Ethan. And then, ever so slowly, he smiled. The lights flickered back on. Matt was gone. Matt was gone. The me where his reflection had just smiled now showed nothing but the distorted faces of the three remaining friends, Ethan, Lisa, and Jordan. Their expressions were twisted with horror, breath coming in sharp, uneven gasps. Lisa clutched Ethan's arm. "Where is he? Where the hell did he go?" Jordan was still pounding against the glass, his fists leaving smudges but no cracks. "This isn't real. This isn't real," he muttered. Like repeating it would somehow break whatever nightmare they had stepped into. Ethan swallowed hard, trying to suppress the rising panic. We need to find a way out of here. Standing still isn't an option. They turned a corner, only to be met with more mirrors. Their own reflections flickered and warped as they moved. But something wasn't right. The reflections weren't matching their movements exactly. A split-second delay. A twitch that hadn't happened. A blink too slow. Lisa noticed it first. "Ethan," she whispered, gripping his sleeve so tightly her nails dug into his skin. "What?" Lisa slowly raised a trembling finger toward the mirror ahead of them. Ethan followed her gaze, and his stomach dropped. In the mirror, they weren't alone. Behind them, standing in the dimly lit hallway, was Matt. But something was wrong. His head was tilted, his limbs unnaturally stiff. His eyes were gone, replaced by empty bleeding sockets. And in his mouth, where teeth should have been, there was only darkness. But Matt wasn't behind them. Not in reality, only in the reflection. Jordan let out a sharp breath. "Oh my God!" Matt's reflection grinned, then without warning it lunged. Lisa screamed. Jordan stumbled back, nearly tripping over himself. Ethan instinctively turned, expecting to see Matt behind them, but the hallway was empty. Yet, when he looked back at the mirror, Matt's twisted, eyeless figure was still there, slamming his hands against the glass, his mouth stretching unnaturally wide, as if he were trying to break through. Crack! A spiderweb of fractures bloomed across the mirror. Ethan grabbed Lisa and Jordan's arms. "Run!" They sprinted blindly through the funhouse maze, dodging mirrors that seemed to shift as they moved. The laughter of the long-forgotten park echoed in their ears, warped and unnatural, as if the walls themselves were mocking them. Behind them, footsteps, fast, unrelenting, and then the sound of glass shattering. Lisa gasped. "He's coming! Oh my God, he's coming!" Jordan glanced over his shoulder, his eyes widening in horror. "He's out! Matt's out of the mirror!" Ethan risked a glance back. For a split second, he saw it. A figure moving erratically, not quite human anymore. Its limbs bent wrong, its jaw hanging loose as if unhinged, running after them with impossible speed. But it wasn't Matt. Lisa hit the ground hard. Her palms scraped against the dust-covered floor, and a sharp jolt of pain shot up her leg. The dim, flickering light cast long, twisting shadows around them, making it nearly impossible to tell what was real and what wasn't. Ethan and Jordan skidded to a stop, breathless. "Lisa!" Ethan dropped to his knees, grabbing her by the arm. "Get up. We have to—" His voice cut off as a chilling sound filled the air, a low, guttural clicking. It was close, too close. Jordan took a slow, shaky step back. His face was pale, his hands clenched into fists. "Tell me that's not Matt." Ethan turned his head, and his stomach lurched. Just a few feet away, standing beneath the flickering red glow of a broken exit sign, Matt's figure loomed. But it wasn't really him anymore. His body twitched violently, his limbs bending in sharp, unnatural angles, as if something inside him was trying to break free. His mouth hung open, stretching too wide, revealing rows of jagged, uneven teeth that hadn't been there before. His eyes, or what was left of them, were dark, hollow sockets that bled endlessly. And then, in a voice that wasn't his, he spoke. "You should have stayed away." Lisa let out a sob, scrambling backward on her hands. Ethan pulled her up, just as Jordan let out a strangled curse. "Run!" They turned and sprinted, weaving through the twisting, endless halls of the funhouse. Mirrors shattered as they passed, shards raining onto the floor, crunching beneath their desperate footsteps. Behind them, a deafening screech, and then the sound of something crawling. Ethan didn't dare look back. He knew. He felt it. That thing, whatever was inside of Matt, was not running. It was skittering, moving on all fours. Fast, too fast. A door appeared at the end of the corridor. Rusted, heavy. "There!" Jordan shouted. They threw themselves against it, pushing with everything they had. Bang! The sound of Matt's possessed body slamming into the mirrors behind them made their skin crawl. Bang! 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 The door groaned. Then finally, it gave way. They stumbled forward and suddenly, the air changed. The suffocating walls of the funhouse were gone. Instead, they stood in the middle of a vast open field. For a brief, heart-stopping moment, Ethan thought they had finally escaped. But then, his chest tightened. Because this wasn't the outside world. It was still the amusement park, but this part of the park was different. Forgotten. Dead. A thick, heavy fog swirled around them, swallowing the distant structures. The air smelled of mildew, rust, and something sickly sweet, rotting carnival food. And ahead of them, barely visible through the mist, loomed an ancient rotting ride. A carousel. Lisa's voice was barely a whisper. "Where are we?" Jordan turned in circles. This wasn't on the park map. Ethan's heart pounded. His eyes traced the carousel, its peeling paint and motionless horses. The ride looked like it hadn't moved in decades. Vines curled around the poles, weaving through the faded, cracked wood. The once bright carnival lights were now dull, lifeless orbs. But the worst part, the horses had faces, not normal plastic horse faces, human faces, frozen in expressions of terror. Lisa sucked in a sharp breath. Those look real. Jordan shuddered. This place is wrong. It's so wrong. Ethan took a slow step forward. The wooden planks beneath his feet creaked loudly, echoing through the dead carnival. Then the carousel started moving. Not fast, not all at once. A slow, agonizing creak as the horses lurched forward. The music, warped, distorted, broken, began to play, crawling through the air like a whisper of something long forgotten. Lisa grabbed Ethan's arm. "We need to go." Ethan nodded, but before they could turn, the carousel lights blinked on, one by one. The dim bulbs flickered to life, casting eerie, rotating shadows across the ground. And then, a voice, a child's voice, software distant, singing. Round and round, they go so slow. One by one, they never go. Up and down, the horses cry. "Stay too long and say goodbye." Lisa screamed because the horses moved. Not just the ride, the horses themselves. Their mouths twitched, their eyes rolled in their sockets, their wooden hooves scraped against the platform. And then, one of them turned its head directly toward them. Lisa yanked Ethan's sleeve. "We have to run." But before they could, a sudden bone-chilling laughter echoed through the fog. Low, deep, inhuman. And from the other side of the carousel, something stepped forward. A figure. Not Matt, not human. Something older. Something that had been waiting here for a very, very long time. Its arms were too long, its fingers ending in razor-sharp claws. Its face was featureless, except for a wide, grinning mouth. And in its hand, it held a familiar bloodied hoodie. Matt's hoodie. It lifted the torn fabric to its face, inhaling deeply, before tilting its head toward Ethan, Lisa, and Jordan. And then, in a hollow, echoing voice, it spoke. "You brought me more friends." The lights flickered, and the carousel screamed. The moment the carousel screamed, The entire park came alive, not in the way a normal amusement park should. There were no cheerful lights, no playful music, no excited voices. This was something else, a sick, twisted mockery of life. The rusting Ferris wheel in the distance creaked violently, its long dead machinery shuddering as if something inside it was trying to break free. The old roller coaster tracks rumbled, even though no cars had run on them in years. And beneath it all, a deep rhythmic pounding echoed through the fog, like a slow, steady heartbeat. Ethan, Lisa, and Jordan stood frozen, their bodies paralyzed with terror. The grinning keeper, the monstrous figure clutching Matt's torn hoodie, tilted its head. Its body didn't move naturally. It twisted, like a puppet being controlled by unseen hands. And then it took a step forward. Lisa snapped out of her trance first. "Go!" she screamed, grabbing Ethan's arm and pulling him backward. Jordan didn't need to be told twice. They ran. The fog swallowed them whole as they sprinted blindly through the decayed carnival, their footsteps echoing eerily against the pavement. Behind them, they could still hear it. The sound of clicking, skittering, not running, not chasing, just following, like it knew exactly where they would end up. And that terrified Ethan more than anything. The park wasn't just abandoned. It was alive, and it was playing with them. The Hall of Laughs, after what felt like an eternity, they finally stumbled to a stop in front of another building. An old, decrepit funhouse. The sign above the entrance read, "The Hall of Laughs." But the laughs had long since faded, leaving only the Hall of... Jordan panted, clutching his knees. We can't just keep running forever." Lisa wiped the sweat from her brow, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "That thing, it's still following us." Ethan swallowed hard, looking at the funhouse. "We have to hide, just for a second." Lisa hesitated. "You want to hide in there? In a haunted house? In an abandoned park?" Jordan shook his head. "Dude, I swear to God, if this is like one of those horror movies where the dumb characters run into danger instead of away from it..." Ethan turned his eyes dark. "We're already in danger, and I don't hear you coming up with a better idea." Silence. Lisa let out a shaky breath. "Fine, but if I die in a clown house, I'm haunting you forever." Ethan pushed the doors open. They creaked loudly. Inside, pure darkness. But the moment they stepped in, dim, flickering lights flicked on, illuminating the long corridor ahead, and almost instantly, the air shifted. It was colder. And then, a whisper, software lingering. Round and round, the horses cry. "Stay too long, and say goodbye." Lisa froze. Her eyes widened. "That's the song," she whispered. "The one from the carousel." Ethan's blood ran cold. Jordan turned slowly, and then he stiffened. "Guys, look." Ethan and Lisa followed his gaze, and their stomachs dropped. The walls of the funhouse were lined with mirrors, but the reflections inside them weren't their own. They were distorted, warped, and in every single one, Matt was standing behind them, his hollow, bleeding eye sockets dripping black ichor, his twisted, broken grin stretching unnaturally wide. Ethan's breath hitched, and then the mirrors shattered. A shrill, high-pitched cackle erupted from the shadows, echoing through the funhouse like a chorus of mocking laughter. Lisa grabbed Ethan's arm. "We have to leave." But as they turned, the doors were gone. The hallway stretched infinitely in both directions, shifting, changing, a maze. And they were trapped inside. The laughter grew louder, and from the far end of the corridor, a shape emerged. Not the grinning keeper, something else. a tall, gaunt figure dressed in a tattered clown costume. Its painted smile was smeared, its sunken eyes black voids. It took a slow step forward, dragging a long, rusted hook. Scrape, scrape, scrape. Ethan felt Lisa's grip tighten. Jordan whispered, "We're so dead." And then the clown spoke. "You shouldn't have come here." The funhouse screamed, and the lights went out.